Coming up next on Tech News Today, Uber says goodbye to Levandowski. The father of Android unveils what he thinks is an essential phone. Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook actually lobbied the Irish Prime Minister back in 2014. Food delivery is apparently harder than it seems, and a gaming keyboard that you can cry on. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1778, recorded Tuesday, May 30th, 2017. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Oars and Alps, powerful skincare made for a guy's active lifestyle. Join thousands of men using Oars and Alps today. Go to oursandalps.com/twit to receive 15% off of your first order. Hello and welcome to Tech News Today. This is the show where we talk about some of the biggest tech stories with people who are passionate about technology. I'm Jason Howell.
And I'm Nathan Levandowski, and there's a lot of great news to get into today. We're going to start off with Uber.
This boomed. This was like one of those things that I saw hit the Twitter and hit the meme, and I was like, man. Of course this happened.
Uber has fired Anthony Levandowski, its VP of Technology, and the former head of its self-driving car effort. The decision to fire the engineer/executive is part of an ongoing fallout around a lawsuit filed by Levandowski's previous employer, Google, against Uber. Google's self-driving car division, Waymo, has accused Levandowski in its suit of stealing about 14,000 documents worth of self-driving car trade secrets and taking them to Uber. Uber has denied the allegations and says it's developed its autonomous vehicle tech independently. Levandowski, meanwhile, is pleading the fifth. He's not talking. Levandowski led Uber's self-driving car team before moving to an operations role in April. And according to the New York Times, Uber fired him because he refused to help Uber hand over any evidence or testify in Uber's defense in this ongoing legal battle and court matter. So we're going to have to see where it goes. But yeah, this is a big, in some ways it's a bit of like, wow. But at the other end, there, like, from all the stories read, Uber has been telling Levandowski, if you don't cooperate, and if you don't come to our defense, we're going to fire you.
Yeah, and they gave him a deadline. Uber actually set a deadline. I think it was for last Friday for his cooperation. Levandowski did not comply. That deadline passed. As a result, he's out. I guess Judge Alsop, who's the judge in this case, said in a filing last week that Uber had no excuse to, quote, pull any punches in order to force Levandowski's compliance. So it kind of seems like that was taken to heart in this case.
Yeah, the court was putting pressure on Uber to basically kind of almost really do this.
Right.
And it's pretty interesting. Judge Alsop, who you just mentioned, he's presiding over the case. He referred it to the U.S. attorney on May 11th, which means that this could become a criminal case. So this is pretty serious stuff for Uber, for Google, and for Levandowski. Google actually Uber brought Levandowski into its company when they bought a company called Otto, which Levandowski started after he left Google. And he started with that with some ex-Google, Apple, and Tesla employees. And that company was actually focused on self-driving trucking. But Otto, Waymo, and Uber, they all use a similar technology called LiDAR to basically help these self-driving cars understand what's around them and hopefully drive safely, which, as we've seen with some accidents, isn't always the case. But that use of LiDAR is one of the central points of contention here. So
Levandowski in the case isn't named specifically. It's all around Uber. Like it's all pointed at Uber. Uber was hoping for Levandowski's cooperation. Because he's not named specifically and because he's no longer working at Uber, could they pull him into the case, or do they have any reason to? Does that Uber now, like, I wonder if Uber just has control of that information with him out, can now kind of operate around him in that regard in some way?
That's a really good question. Part of the allegation from Waymo is that, in fact, Otto was formed so that Uber could buy it. So they knew they wanted to bring him into the company. They knew they wanted to bring this technology and this know-how into the company. And in fact, Otto was never meant to be an independent operation. It was just something that was there so that Uber could protect itself if it ever came to this, right? Now, Uber also denies that allegation, saying that, hey, Levandowski formed Otto on his own accord. It was his own company. He's, one of the foremost minds when it comes to self-driving tech. How could we not buy the company and take him and his team into what we're doing? But it's worth pointing out that essentially all of Uber's self-driving efforts were built on what Otto was doing. They didn't really have a fully fledged self-driving team like this before. So, there's a lot of back and forth here, and unwinding this whole thing and knowing, where these lines are drawn and, when did this end and when that begin is probably what it sounds like Uber is trying to do, is trying to say, hey, we developed this stuff on our own. Help us make that case and help us show that we aren't bringing any trade secrets here. But it is interesting and noteworthy that Levandowski isn't willing to come to his now former employer's defense against his other former employer.
Yeah, and I mean on the flip side, Uber is out one of the top names in this developing field. So that's not a good place necessarily for Uber to be. At the same time, it really sounds like Levandowski was becoming more and more of a liability in that regard as well. So
yeah, it's a definite risk. I mean, Google with Waymo is throwing down a ton of money and effort into this. Uber, of course, Tesla, Apple, every automaker, major automaker is doing something related to self-driving tech, at least trying to figure it out. There are even reports out there today about Ford and Google speaking in the past about working on some things together and that kind of falling apart. So, to let go someone with that much, there aren't many people with that much experience. And with that much knowledge in their head. But again, I guess to a certain extent, it comes down to, well, who has the rights to that?
Yeah.
Right.
And who knows? Levandowski might be a new Ford employee sometime soon. You never know. That could be right around the corner. Andy Rubin, the father of Android, unveiled his next effort, or his company's next effort in the mobile phone world, the Essential phone. That's the name. Premium specs that rival the Samsung Galaxy S8, a titanium body, which is pretty cool, so very durable, with the ceramic back, very not durable as far as I know about ceramic. Pure Android nougat, a near bezel-less screen design, and magnetic pins on the back, only for powering connected accessories that can add functionality to the device. That then transfers wirelessly back to the device. So, for example, the phone releases with an optional 360-degree camera module. It's $50 at launch. I think it's actually normally $200, or at least that's what the site said. It seems kind of steep for me, but it snaps into place to draw power, and that data is sent back to the phone wirelessly. So the Essential phone is currently up for pre-order, $699.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm kind of disappointed. I mean, there's been a lot of hype around this phone. Andy Rubin, you think of some of the smartest people in Silicon Valley and in consumer tech. This is the guy that's basically, like you said, the father of Android.
Also the sidekick. He was
he did, which is really amazing. I mean, that was that was a cultural touchstone in mobile phone computing. And this phone, the pogo pin idea for the back, I'm not sure people really want modular phones to begin with. Motorola's tried that. Google has tried that before as well. But the pogo pins, that's something that Andy Rubin, back when he was at Google, was playing with on Nexus devices for quite a long time. That's kind of an old idea, and I'm not really sure people really want that. The bezel-less thing, that's kind of where all phones are going. You expect to see that from a high-end phone these days. If you had a high-end phone that had a bunch of bezel, you'd be pissed, right? And I'm not totally sure that I like the way that it kind of, use up around the camera.
It notches around the camera, which is a little. It
seems like a design compromise. I mean, this looks like a great phone, but it also looks like the sort of thing that could come from Samsung or LG or HTC, which I guess maybe that's a bit of a compliment for a company that really hasn't delivered anything yet.
Just launched, right?
But at the same time, I want to see Andy Rubin break some new ground and deliver something and wow us. And this really just kind of feels like more of the same to me.
Yeah, I mean, dual cameras on the back. We've seen a lot of dual camera phones.
Yep.
One of them is a monochrome sensor, so that's better for kind of like low light shots, letting in more light. That's how it's being used here instead of that like bokeh thing, which which I mean, some people love, some people hate. It's compatible with all major U.S. carriers, so there's that. However, you won't be able to go into a carrier and buy this off the shelf.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do it through their site. Burke thinks that it's too expensive.
It's like $700. The phone itself.
I mean, it's a premium. It's a premium Android smartphone in the marketplace right now, and it's their first take.
It's you know, like, what does this contribute to what smartphones are? Right. It's just like one more high-end option, but it doesn't really feel like it's pushing phones as a whole in meaningful new directions to me so far. But you know, we haven't gotten a chance to test it out. You know, I'd love to try it out and see if maybe there's something I'm missing. I'd really like to learn more about what they're calling the Ambient OS, which is their version of Android. I've always really loved stock Android. It's like the only version of Android I really genuinely enjoy using all of the time. And that was kind of Andy Rubin's baby for a long time. So I'm hoping that the Ambient OS keeps things simple, but you know, to differentiate, they're going to have some different features.
Yeah,
too,
I
right?
mean, there was a good article in Wired that had a lot of good kind of choice Andy Rubin quotes.
Yeah.
And one thing that he really stressed is that the essential phone is the phone that he would make for himself. And he says he does this every time. When he designs a phone, he designs a phone that has everything that he would want. So there's no logo on this, for example.
Yeah.
So it's stock Android. So that tells me that
it is stock Android.
That's what he said in the interview. The Ambient OS actually relates, from what I can understand. I'm curious to know if there's interplay between the two efforts, though, to this next product that's also part of the announcement. Andy also unveiled an entirely new type of product, in quotes, with the Essential Home. It's a hockey puck-shaped home control device, similar in scope to, you know, the usuals.
The Google Home, the Amazon Echo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Controls music, setting timer, controlling smart home hardware, and also answering voice queries, so you can do searches. However, one key feature difference is that it runs most of its data crunching on the device itself. So that's going to appeal to those who are privacy conscious but want a device like this. Includes a round display on the top, so you get that visual feedback. And this is, in fact, running Essential's Ambient OS. So I'm very curious to know what is the line between Ambient OS on this versus, is that what they call the OS, you know, layer on the Essential phone? He says that it's close to stock, so maybe Ambient OS is a very close, if not near, you know, identical to stock version of the OS. It's just they're utilizing it more in the home. Yeah,
you know, just as disappointed or maybe meh as I feel about the phone, I am actually genuinely excited about the Essential Home because of that privacy protection. That's really the only reason. Now, the fact that that is such a differentiator and so important, I think, is a bit sad compared to what Google's doing with the Google Home, what Amazon does with the Echo speaker. But you know, privacy does matter, and as we give up more and more information about ourselves, what we're doing, where we're at, who we're with, what we're consuming to these companies, it's more and more of an ask of trust. And I think it's interesting here that coming from Google, a company that's really built on you giving all of that trust to a company. Just immense amount of trust. Now he's delivering something that has a focus on privacy, which is very un-Google-like, and dare I say almost Apple-like. Like that's kind of what you would expect a differentiating factor to be if Apple ever delivers the rumored Siri speaker or whatever, right? So that's really interesting. I'd be excited to see how that works, and also if it's compatible with only this phone, or if it's compatible with other stuff, point. Or you know, it sounds like it's going to be
widely compatible.
Yeah,
it better be.
It sounds like it's going to
have any sort of chance whatsoever,
right? Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be compatible with like Nest and all those sorts of things,
for sure.
But it's an interesting combo.
Yeah, and also this is kind of a unique take on this as well. We were talking about the modules on the Essential phone. Those will work, like basically Andy Rubin says, if we're creating a modular ecosystem, we want those modules to follow you on no matter what device we use. So they work for the phone. They also work for the home. I don't know why you need a 360-degree camera to snap into your home, but maybe that extends the functionality of that type of device beyond what we're used to thinking about it mere couple of years into that device category even existing. Maybe 360-degree camera, as one example, has a particular use case for being clipped to a home device like this.
Yeah.
And we just have never thought of it before. You know what I mean? So he's taking that idea of modular functionality and saying this shouldn't just die with the phone.
Yeah.
When you buy a new device through us, they all come with you.
That's a pretty fascinating idea. And like I said, he's played with pogo pins and modularity in the past. And clearly this is something he believes in. He won't give up on it. And you know, maybe this will be the thing that finally gets modularity to catch on. I do also kind of wonder, you know, we know who Andy Rubin is because we're geeks about this sort of thing. A lot of our viewers probably know who Andy Rubin is because they're enthusiasts, they're early adopters, they're following the news as well. But outside of, you know, us, how big of a name is Andy Rubin? Do people really care who he is? I mean, there's very few Andy Rubins in Silicon Valley. There are even, you know, in tech and consumer gadgets and phones, there are even fewer folks that are maybe above his level, and you know, that would be like a Johnny Ive or something. You know, I don't really know if Andy Rubin's a household name enough to sell this phone. So I didn't see a lot about what their marketing plan would be, or what their branding strategy, or what that kind of push would look like. And that's something that I feel like is missing here as well. Yeah,
it'll be very curious to see, because in part of that Wired article, he kind of talks about how the big names want to do innovative things, but the problem is they come with so much demand. Like, you know, he's thinly veiled, you know, pointing at Samsung, that it's hard to implement these big, you know, major shifts in innovation because of the amount of devices and amount of support that's required from the people that make the technology that supports it. And he's saying that puts a company like Essential in a great position to not need to be that huge behemoth that everybody buys into, but you still need some sort of awareness and some sort of support. And you're buying your phone directly from Essential, at least as it stands right now, because you're not getting it through carriers. So that awareness, I'd be very curious to see how they generate that.
And you know, I think he's right. I think because, you know, it is a smaller company, there's more room there to play and experiment and do some crazy stuff. But nothing here really feels crazy. You know, nothing here feels like, oh, what? I've never thought of that before, never seen that before. Here's something that like I didn't expect, or that makes sense, or it's just kind of like, well, I could see this existing from Samsung. It seems like something, you know, so-and-so could make, that company, or Xiaomi or whatever. So you know, we'll see. I don't want to be too hard on Andy, but we'll see. Can't wait to try this stuff out in person.
Put my reservation in, so we'll see when that happens. I don't know when it's going to, you know, there's no date on when it's going to actually ship. So there we go.
More questions. Well, Sheryl Sandberg, lobbyist in 2014, Facebook's famed chief operating officer, personally lobbied the Irish Prime Minister, Taoiseach Enda Kenny, both offering praise and threatening to take Facebook's investment dollars away from Ireland if the company basically didn't get its way. Facebook's European headquarters are in Dublin, Ireland, and the Irish Independent got a hold of emails between Enda Kenny and Sandberg thanks to a public records request. In one conversation, as Facebook had just expanded its Dublin office and headcount there, Sandberg said that Facebook believes it's important to have a single European tax regulator rather than different tax regulations in different countries. She wrote, quote, "Without this, the risk is that companies will revisit their investment strategies for the EU market," end quote. Some of what Sandberg had pushed for has come to fruition, such as a quote-unquote one-stop shop provision in the EU's new privacy laws that will go into effect next year. So it seems that at least some of her tactics are at least partially successful. Just the fact that she did this at all is somewhat surprising to me, such a personal level of lobbying. But, you know, as far as people at Facebook who hold a tremendous amount of sway and are going to get an email back from a prime minister level politician, there's probably not too many other than Sandberg or Zuckerberg himself, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and I wonder how much this happens behind closed doors. I mean, this was only surfaced because of Freedom of Information Act, sort of, you know, request. I'm sure a lot of this, I'm sure there's a lot of these kind of conversations on the back end, because a company as big as Facebook, you know, has a lot to gain and a lot to lose depending on how these regions develop, especially if they're headquartered there.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating thing to me. Really, we're getting to a point, or we're already there and past it maybe, but where companies like Facebook, yeah, okay, maybe their headquarters are in the United States and in one specific city or town, but they're really international companies, and they have the sort of force and influence that in some cases matches that of other governments.
For sure.
And sometimes the profits that they're bringing in, the revenue and the financial investments they're making outmatch the gross domestic product of a lot of countries as well, right?
Yeah.
So in some sense, they are somewhat political entities, and maybe this is a reminder or a reason for us to really start thinking of them as political forces. As weird as that might be to say or think. A lot of folks have been asking lately if Mark Zuckerberg is going to run for president. People have been asking if Sandberg is going to run for senator for years. But they're playing in the political space.
Absolutely. That's a pretty crazy thing to come to the realization of. And then when you kind of extend that, and this doesn't just go for Facebook, this goes for companies like Google as well, just the amount of information that they have about people and then the kind of moves that they make in the political spectrum. It's like that crossover there can feel a little icky, you know what I mean?
It totally can.
Once you realize those things, it makes you kind of second guess the thoughts that you may have had about this just being a fun service to use or whatever. You end up realizing just how it actually shapes the political spectrum, and is that a good or a bad thing? Do you feel okay with that?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. I do kind of wonder, half jokingly, but seriously, I wonder if maybe today, she's maybe messaging some folks and saying, hey, let's use Facebook Messenger instead of email, less of a paper trail. We can control that data or something, because to know that those emails are in the public record and therefore accessible through a public records request. Yeah. It seems like they're not necessarily trying to hide this. Right. And this was probably not something that they would be too ashamed of doing anyways.
Yeah, right. Researchers at Checkpoint have discovered a new type of malware for Android that's been called Judy. It's been distributed on the Google Play Store in light of Google's official protection mechanism, Bouncer. So it kind of happened around Bouncer, which is what the Play Store utilizes right now to crack down on stuff that it finds. A number of apps created by South Korean developer Kiniwiki, all with Judy in the title, so now you know why it's named Judy, acted as the delivery mechanism for the malware. The challenge for Google is that the malicious code wasn't in the games themselves. Once downloaded, the games would connect to a remote server to then serve back the malware that would open up a hidden browser in the background and connect to and then click on served up ads for generating revenue. So basically you're playing a game. There's a browser in the background that's just clicking on ads and making someone rich.
Yeah, this is fascinating. This was on about like what, a couple dozen apps, like 50 apps or something like that?
Yeah, 40 in this case, and then beyond that they found that code in other apps, so they don't know if that was placed there surreptitiously or if it was knowingly put there. They still don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the double-edged sword of Android, and if you're an Android user, it's something you need to be conscious of and aware of, is simply that Android will let your apps do more than iOS, and if you're a modder or a developer yourself, like this is part of the allure, right? But it also means that even Google's own security checks can sometimes miss out on stuff because simply apps can go in places that they're walled off from for security reasons on iOS, and it's just kind of fascinating that here's this example of there was like what'd you say, about 36 million Android devices that were impacted by this?
Yeah, somewhere as far as downloaded users or downloaded users of these apps, somewhere between 8.5 to 36.5 million. That's a big
pretty
swing,
big broad spectrum,
but somewhere in there based on the number of apps and how long. And I think that the difficulty here is knowing how long that code was actually in there, because some of these games have existed long before the code was dropped in. The earliest point that they could even say on one game is April 2016 is the last update, but that showed that was in there. The other ones, they've been updated since. It's impossible to go back in the history and know exactly when it was dropped in, so you don't know exactly how many users have had it.
It's tough for even Google to really be able to quantify how big of a thing this may or may not have been. But pretty fascinating stuff, and just something that if you use Android, you got to know about. I mean, the Google Play Store is the safest place to get your apps.
For sure.
You know, regardless of this, you know, you should still be using Play to get your apps, and it is the safest place. But even there, some stuff can get around.
Some stuff gets through, and then it gets figured out, and then it becomes part of Google's filter.
Exactly.
And that won't happen again. But every once in a while. But I'm very used to seeing these stories and then reading the point of it. That's like, this all came from third-party marketplaces or from pirated blah blah blah. And it's like, well, don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, go to an official store and the Play Store and do it. Every once in a while. It happens here too.
Every once in a while. Yep.
Never happened to me that I know of, though. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I've surreptitiously made someone rich.
Well, who knows? I mean, and it's like a background browser that's just like clicking these ads. It's like, you're helping someone game the system, and you don't even know it. You know, so. Well, in a big win for consumers, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled 8-0 that patent protections end once a company sells a product to an end user, and thus can't keep an end user from repairing an item themselves if they so choose. The case at stake in all this was Impression Products versus Lexmark, the printer company. Lexmark was blocking others from refilling old printer cartridges with ink and reselling them at a lower price, including a 25-person company from West Virginia called Impression Products that was built on the resale of refurbished printer cartridges. Lexmark argued that its patents on its printer cartridges meant that it could only sell and refill its own cartridges. The Supreme Court said, no, the patents don't extend that protection. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in his decision that, quote, extending the patent rights beyond the first sale would clog the channels of commerce with little benefit from the extra control that patentees retain, end quote. After losing the case, Lexmark's lawyers said that the price of ink cartridges will likely go up as printer companies learn how to deal with the new environment. Now, this may sound like an obscure fight over ink cartridges, but the implications of this ruling were actually major. Had Lexmark won, the decision would have changed the way aftermarket sales work for all kinds of industries, including the pharmaceutical industry and the aftermarket for medical device parts, computer parts, and even car parts. So definitely something that could get lost in the news, but a pretty important ruling from the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I love learn how to deal with the new environment. They've been dealing with this new environment for years.
Yeah.
It's been happening forever. I guess the difference here is, at least as far as the printer cartridges in this case are concerned, is that Impression Products figured out how to pop out Lexmark's. It had a proprietary cartridge, a chip on its cartridges. And it figured out how to pop those off in order to then apply them to refillable cartridges, allowing someone to, you know, kind of get around it. That chip was placed there specifically for that reason, to protect against that. It turns out even that is okay. You know, when you buy a product, it is your product to modify and
do with what.
That's basically what this means, is you can do that now, or you can still do that and not have to worry about something coming down on you.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. This is a new environment that they've been dealing for quite a while. You know, that chip was there specifically just to keep you buying from them. And, you know, HP and others, they have subscription services set up where you can get your cartridges on a regular basis from that company, or you can get refills, or you can send yours back or whatever. So, you know, this is not a new idea. A lot of printer companies, they make more money on the ink than they do the printers themselves. I mean, the cost of ink is pretty ridiculous. So this really, I gotta say, it feels like a win for the little guys here. That these companies that are trying to keep you from changing something that you buy, or even just maintaining it, even just using it, and getting your parts from somewhere else. This does kind of, it feels like a win for the little guys here. Yeah,
and you mentioned the whole, you know, buy the printer for cheap and then make the money up on ink. I wonder if in the long run this changes that. If they go, well, okay, fine, then we're going to charge more for our printer because now we can't, you know, lock down on this. I hope that doesn't happen.
I could see a little bit of that happening. I do have to say though, I don't own a printer, and I haven't owned a printer basically since like the middle of college. I got rid of one because I was able to find free printing on campus. But and since then in my life, I haven't needed to own one. No, of course we do have one in the office, and there are reasons why you need one in that sense. But you know, that's just my anecdote. But it does seem as though the market for home printers, for people who are buying them, since we can do so much stuff digitally, including signing things and paying our bills and all that stuff, it seems like that market is dwindling anyways. I mean, do you own a home printer?
Yeah, we have a home printer at home, and we use it fairly regularly. I mean, little things pop up, you know what I mean? There's little reasons here and there to use it. And when we don't have a specific reason to use it, our kids have figured out how to go in there and photocopy coloring pages.
Oh, okay.
And stuff. So they definitely put it to use.
I can see that.
Quick reminder that you can comment on anything that we discuss by emailing tnt@twit.tv. And of course, you can subscribe to Tech News Today by going to our show page, twit.tv/TNT. Up next, the end of the food delivery economy is nigh, but first, let's take a minute to thank Ors and Alps, the sponsor of this episode. We're super excited to have Ors and Alps on the board. Now let's talk about skin, because that's what it's all about. GQ calls Ors and Alps a new essential for your daily routine. It's powerful skincare made for a guy's dehydrated skin and active lifestyle. I know my skin gets dehydrated. Ors and Alps Face Cleansing Stick is the first men's solid face wash. And I can kind of show you. I actually have it here in the box. It's this little stick. It's very, very interesting. It's spill-proof, activated charcoal. So that's charcoal on the inside there. You kind of apply it to your face. It exfoliates, pulls impurities. You kind of apply it all around, then splash it off, and your face is clean. It's pretty awesome. 2-in-1 hydrating and anti-aging face and eye cream. Yeah, you can see it right there in the middle. Is non-greasy. It's fast absorbing and no nonsense natural deodorant in this box, which nourishes your skin, absorbs odor, which is, you know, kind of what you want out of a nice deodorant there. Everything, as you can see, super portable, TSA approved, made with powerful and natural ingredients that offer intense hydration. It's all super good for your skin. Products last up to 3 months. And Ors and Alps products were developed actually by 2 women, Laura and Mia, for their husbands. They partnered with leading chemists and created Ors and Alps to protect their husband's skin from extreme outdoor conditions that often resulted in dry, cracked skin. Let's face it, sometimes us guys, we are not very good at taking care of our own skin. So I'm really happy that Laura and Mia did that and created these products. Laura and Mia also set out to solve a common problem, spilled product in gym bags. So they created the first solid face wash for men, and that as I showed you, it's really easy to just apply and it's super portable. Products are perfect to take on the go, gym, work, travel, or your next adventure. Maybe you're climbing the Alps. There you go. Their name was inspired by their husband's favorite outdoor activities. Ors, as in rowing, Alps, as in skiing. Your skincare should keep up with your on-the-go lifestyle. And that is what this is all about. Actually, it's a perfect gift for Father's Day or even a recent grad. If you have one in your family, you know, you can show them how to take better care of themselves. Ors and Alps is offering the Twit audience a fresh start to your day. Join the thousands of guys using Ors and Alps. Visit orsandalps.com/twit. You'll receive 15% off your first order. That's ORSANDALPS. orsandalps.com/twit. And we thank Ors and Alps for their support. Food delivery isn't easy for Silicon Valley, and joining us to talk about that reality is Alison Griswold from Quartz. How's it going, Alison?
Good. How are you?
Doing awesome. It's great to have you back. You wrote a couple of pieces we're going to talk about today. First of all, the piece where you declared the golden era of VC-subsidized meals officially over. It's a big declaration. What are you seeing now that signals that declaration for you?
So recently you've seen a bunch of food delivery companies go out of business. There was Maple, which closed its doors in New York earlier this month. And then just last week you had Sprig, which was sort of like the Maple of San Francisco. They shut down. And you had Spoon Rocket before that. And you've just seen this pattern of a lot of companies that tried to deliver meals or deliver food on demand. They're all, not all, but many of them are having a very hard time. And the first thing you start to see, if it's not that they go under, is they reduce their discounts and they increase their fees.
Is there something to be about kind of the localization of some of these services too? Like there are services that serve, you know, all across the United States, and then there are these like hyper local ones. Does that put them at a disadvantage in this market?
It's hard to say. So I think a lot of this is a hyper local business, right? the sort of quintessential example of a successful food delivery company is you have Seamless in New York. And Seamless is huge in New York. A ton of people use it. It's owned by Grubhub, but it has an independent brand because it was acquired by Grubhub when it was still Seamless, and they just kept the branding. And that, like, despite Postmates and DoorDash and Maple and all these other companies that had some users, like, Seamless is just far and away the dominant company in New York. But then you have other cities where there's just sort of a mix. And because they're new, there isn't as much brand loyalty. And it is more, like you're saying, it's more of a market specific thing in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Along with a lot of these startups, there is a bit of, hubris and kind of just rhetoric around changing, how we eat food, how we consume food. There are these grand ideas from a lot of the startups that have been investing and subsidizing these meals as these companies, as you've pointed out, have been going under. Does the premise still hold, but it's just going to be a more expensive thing to do and pull off? Or are companies just like literally giving up on this whole concept of trying to add this, tech layer over the top of food delivery?
Well, it's tough because one of the things that's interesting about food delivery is when you had a lot of these companies start, especially the ones that sort of managed the whole process, right? Like a Maple, where they made their food and they sourced their ingredients and then they delivered it to you, is their pitch was sort of, because we control the entire supply chain, we can extract inefficiencies that other people haven't been able to. And so that's how we're going to give you really nice food at a low cost. But for a long time, I was talking to a lot of these companies and I would say, like, give me an example, right? What are you doing to improve your supply chain? And they would sort of say, oh, it's really complicated. We can't get into it. And I think what we're seeing now is that maybe some of those inefficiencies that we promised to extract weren't extracted. I don't know, like the model hasn't panned out the way that it was pitched initially.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if this is a matter of technology minds not understanding the food industry to a certain degree. Although I have to imagine with the amount of money that goes into something like this, hopefully, they bring in the people that do understand the food industry to the point to where they can solve these problems.
Yeah, it's funny because a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to David Chang, who's sort of the famed restaurateur who owns Momofuku, and he put his name on Maple, and he subsequently started another food delivery startup. And he said something to me like, people in tech think food is simple because it's food, but it's not simple. Like, it's actually kind of complicated, and there are a lot of layers to it. And just because you're good at tech doesn't mean you're good at food.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about demand? I mean, are people lining up to sign up for these services, or maybe demand is lower than what they require?
Yeah, so I think, the demand is definitely there for, if you think in the broadest sense, right, of food that is delivered to us. Domino's is huge, and they deliver pizza. That's their fundamental business model. Seamless, which is owned by Grubhub. Grubhub is doing quite well. Their last earnings, they performed extremely well. Their stock was up. But a lot of the sort of startup companies, what they did was, for a long time, they came in and they gained customers and they got you to order things from them by giving you a lot of discounts, because everyone likes discounts, right? Mm-hmm. If you give me free money, I like that. I like free money. And then at some point they had to start trying to make their business more profitable, so they took the discounts away. And that is a very hard transition, because once you give someone something for free, they don't like to start paying more for it.
I'm glad that you mentioned Domino's. Obviously, that's a relatively successful delivery-based business, but all they do is make pizza, right? Where, for example, Sprig, they were making meals. They had their own people that were like actually cooking things and delivering those. Is there a difference between maybe, say, like the Grubhubs and the Postmates of this world that are delivering other people's food versus the companies that are trying to make food and have their own chefs and things like that?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. So the Postmates that are just delivering food, I think we could say they're more of a pure middleman, right? Because the value that they are adding is just that delivery piece. They are a service that exists between you and the place where you're ordering from. And the ones that make their own food, they're sort of like both the middleman and the original supplier combined into one. So it's interesting because there's kind of a debate among these companies, which is the more successful model. And by more successful, I mean, again, you have the companies that are in sort of the make and deliver the food camp, like the Sprigs, the Maples, that believed if you controlled the whole supply chain, you were better equipped to control your costs. And then you have the companies that are sort of like the Postmates and the DoorDash. And what they think is that you don't want to deal with having any of that inventory. You know, it's better to be assetless. And the money to be made is just by being the service in the middle.
So do you think at the end of the day, Superman, also known as Amazon, like flies in and is like, hey, we got this. Peace out, everybody.
Hot
like,
dogs by drone or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. Could happen. I mean, is it going to take somebody of that, or like a company of that caliber to really crack this nut? Because you know the demand is there. People want this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's hard to say. You know, I think one thing that's potentially formidable about Amazon, and it's still very early, but you can totally envision a world in which free food delivery is just something you get with Amazon Prime, right? Maybe they increase the price of Prime, so instead of $99, it's like $115. I'm just making this up, but you also get, you know, with that, you get unlimited free food delivery, and that's something that Amazon could do because Amazon has its cloud business, and that makes a lot of money, and they just reinvest it into sort of their consumer-facing services. And most of the food delivery companies don't have an alternative revenue stream like that to bolster their business models. They're just working with whatever venture capital funding they have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, from food delivery to people delivery, you wrote last week about how Uber is charging riders based on their ability to pay. Price discrimination in the article, but that it's not inherently a bad thing, at least according to some economists. How does this pricing model work exactly?
Yeah, so this pricing model is sort of a natural evolution out of a thing Uber had been doing called upfront pricing. And just in case people aren't familiar, upfront pricing is where Uber, when at the time at which you order a ride, they tell you your ride will be $14.26. And then you hit yes and you accept it. So at the time at which you take the ride, you've already agreed to the price. And what upfront pricing did that was significant was it eliminated consumer-facing surge pricing, which was where Uber would show you sort of the blue multiplier that said, demand is off the charts. Like, this ride is 2.5 times what it normally is. And that didn't mean the ride wasn't more if demand was there. They just weren't telling you. So it was sort of hidden. It was built into the price implicitly. And so what they're doing now with route-based pricing is they're charging people based on how much they think those people are able to pay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and how is that analysis done on the side of Uber? Is it just past behavior in the app? Is it region? Like, how is that determined?
So we don't know too much about it. Most of the details were reported by Bloomberg. And what they said was that it's sort of based on your neighborhood. So if you live in say you have two people and they both get an Uber and they're going to one's going to destination A and the other's going to destination B. And the routes are the same in that they're the same distance. It's going to take the same time. There's the same amount of traffic. But A is like a nice ritzy neighborhood and B is a less nice ritzy neighborhood. The person going to A might get charged more because Uber evaluates that and says, oh, they're going to this nice fancy neighborhood. We can charge them more.
Has there been any backlash to this? Because, I mean, the first thing that I really honestly think when I hear this is it makes me not want to use Uber anymore. And in fact, we've seen airlines that, you know, if you're buying on your phone versus buying in a computer, or if you're buying and they can determine your location is this city versus that city or this neighborhood versus this neighborhood, and the pricing changes, and there's a genuine consumer backlash and concerns over what is essentially price discrimination. Has there been any backlash or negative reaction to what Uber's throwing out here yet?
So this is a really good segue because this gets to the point, right? Like you hear this and as an average consumer, you think this is discriminatory. This isn't fair to me. I'm being exploited based on whatever Uber has surmised about my characteristics. But what an economist thinks when they look at this is, oh, this is efficient. Like they're being charged what they can pay. And the thing is, efficient for an economist, efficient doesn't necessarily mean good, right? Like efficient and morally good are two different things. But in the world of economics, what they would say is that the difference between what you are willing to pay, like if you're willing to pay $20 for something and you're charged $15, the difference between those two, that $5, is considered the consumer surplus is the term for it. And so why this is efficient economically is because Uber is just collecting all the consumer surplus. They know you would pay $20. They're charging you $20 and there is no consumer surplus. Most of us don't think like economists. So we hear this and we think Uber is ripping me off.
Well, yeah, and I wonder how many of the average, Uber consumers, the Uber riders, actually know that that's happening on the back end. Where else I'm curious if you know, and I should have gone looking for this myself, but I didn't think about it until just now, where else this model exists. And if it exists in other places, which I'm sure it does if economists are saying that it's a super efficient system, does the consumer know about it there? And you know what I mean? Like how does that play with their desire to use the service in other examples?
Well, like you said, airlines are a really good example. Airlines are notorious for charging people more based on how high the demand is because of the time of year or the destination or like a whole lot of different factors. And they've gotten in trouble for it. There have been several investigations into airlines and their pricing tactics to see if they're fair. Amazon got in trouble years ago because it had figured out based on cookies if people were new customers or returning customers. And if you were new, it would show you a lower price for some items than someone who was a returning customer. And there was a big consumer backlash against that. And if I'm remembering right, the CEO said, we won't do this anymore because it just wasn't worth it. I mean, the amount of money that they were making relatively on that, I assume, didn't make up for how upset people were about it.
Right.
What about rival services like Lyft or any others out there? Is anyone else trying a similar tactic?
So we don't know if Lyft and Juno and some of the others are necessarily doing this route-based pricing model. But like if you've ever taken Lyft line, you'll know that it's the same in terms of the upfront pricing, right? Where you order a Lyft line, which is like the pooled Lyft service, and they give you a price and you agree to the price. So maybe it's like $465 or something, right? And so I think that the bigger point is that we don't know if they're doing it, but they could be, because this like upfront pricing model of showing you a price and asking you to agree to it is sort of the natural step that comes before where Uber has gone with it.
And Uber's, proving that it can work to a certain degree anyways. We'll see how much longer that lasts. Thank you so much, as always, for coming on, Alison Griswold from Quartz.com. And you can follow Alison at Alison Griswold on Twitter. Really appreciate you coming on and talking about a few of your stories today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon, Alison.
All right, time for a little bit of feedback. Tony wrote to tnt@twit.tv with a comment about last week's news that laptops might be banned from carry-on for flights entering the United States. Tony says, quote, "As someone that has been doing long-haul flights, mostly into Asia, I routinely seem to have luggage go missing at both ends of the flight. It has happened so frequently that for years I have only checked my clothes and keep all my electronics and cameras in my carry-on. Already, I've heard of friends from the Middle East of losing their valuable business data that was on expensive laptops inside checked luggage. The luggage showed up on the carousel, but their electronics were missing. Just something else to think about when you're watching your new 15-inch MacBook Pro disappear behind that rubber curtain."
No, come back.
End quote.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it sounds like Tony's done a lot of traveling and has been through these sorts of things before. And as you mentioned, it's a good point. But if it's not even an option, what are folks going to do, right?
Yeah, and I mean, gosh, I'm only kind of thinking about this now, so I don't know how well formulated of a thought it is. But when your technology, when your device goes out of your possession, and the amount of information that it carries, like you just don't know. And especially if it's like very highly sensitive material you don't want to end up in the wrong hands, yet you're forced to check it underneath. That's a pretty big conundrum to be in because you have to make that decision of whether it's okay for you to be separated from that information, and who knows what happens to it.
Yeah, it's a big ask of travelers to have to go through that sort of thing and to do those sorts of things. And I gotta say, I don't think it's necessarily been the reasoning as to why this is a consideration and why this may or may not be necessary. I don't feel like it's been really fully explained by really any government entity, and it's not just the U.S. who's playing with these sorts of things. Other countries are as well.
Yeah.
So there still seems to be this kind of like vague cloud of like, well, it's for your safety. We just need to do this, and it's like, well, if you're going to ask me to give something up on that level, giving the reasoning behind a bit more transparency, I think, is only fair. And we really haven't seen that from I think any nation that's asking people to do this so far.
Yeah, absolutely. TNT's fan of the day is Cardelius from Croatia, who sent us these images showing, I didn't expect this one, a stuffed Winnie the Pooh on a perch watching you, Nate. How do you feel about that?
I love it. My mom's a huge Winnie the Pooh fan, so I watched those. The Winnie the Pooh movies were always on as a background when I was a kid, even if I didn't want to watch that because it's been on like dozens of times. But I love Winnie the Pooh. This is adorable. I like that he has his own like right-sized little stool ottoman thing. That's like the perfect height for him to be watching TV comfortably.
I'm pretty sure that's where Winnie the Pooh is every time there's a TNT episode, probably even right now.
That's good.
Hey, everybody has to have a comfortable chair to watch. So.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that at all.
Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup. Post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook. Use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT, and we're going to find it.
Well, we've all seen it, a grubby, grimy keyboard. You might even have one near you right now, filled with food crumbs, lint, maybe even a couple stains from a drink or two. If this sounds like your keyboard, then you're going to want to check out the Corsair K68 mechanical keyboard. It has IP32 water resistance rating, which means it can handle all the dust, crumbs, grime, and spills you can dump on it. Each key in the K68 has an individual silicon rubber shield to protect the internal hardware. You can actually use this keyboard while a couple of ice cubes are melting on it or even in the rain. So you can spill a can of Monster energy drink or whatever it is and you'll be fine, but it's not waterproof enough to say use while you're in the bathtub. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but I'm just letting you know where the line is at. Yes. You can spill on it, but don't submerge this thing. Don't take it too far. But nonetheless, if you are grubby, basically if you can pick up your keyboard right now, shake it and stuff falls out, this might be a good keyboard for you, right?
Let's see. Let's put this to the test.
Oh, yeah.
I think the Pixel's pretty shallow. So
I regularly use one of those like little air cans to get stuff out of my. I can't stand it. But
yeah.
But I'm not going to call out any names. But I've had some friends and coworkers over the years who, you look at their keyboard and you don't, it's like, what is that? It's like the inside of a Butterfinger mixed with like, like a juju bean and then like a. Yeah,
it's leftovers. That's what it is.
Leftovers. It's leftovers.
Well, I'm not going to say it, but Burke's going to go there.
Oh God, what is that?
What are we looking at? Is this?
That's Padre's keyboard.
Oh, okay. Man.
Well, then you and
it looks
Burke
like Winnie the Pooh got a haircut over the top of that keyboard. Exactly. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. So the keys apparently never touch the shielding. And what's more important than that, when you're talking about like high performance gaming. Keyboards, you want this kind of certain feel, certain performance, and so you don't want something in there that's going to change the feel of the keyboard. Yep. And so they say the keys never touch the shielding, so there's no trade-off there.
But since it is a mechanical keyboard, and gamers love this, it also might drive you or your coworkers nuts, but it has a clicky-clacky noise.
Good. Yes.
Which I kind of like, but again, might not be for the people around you. But it all sells for about $100, so it's not cheap. but it might be worth it. You know, it might be worth it if you got those grubby fingers.
I've never spent $100 on a keyboard, but I have to imagine. I mean, there's a total market for like the high-end keyboard.
Oh, yeah.
Gamers will. I mean, it's another controllable device that they use for something they're very passionate about with gaming.
Totally, and this one has like a red backlight. The backlighting is very popular with a lot of hardcore PC gamers. You can't change it into multiple different colors. Some have a rainbow kind of thing going, but
there's the little rubber kind of design underneath. It's also very good if you find yourself crying every time you open social media. Your keyboard will be protected.
Your keyboard will be red.
Yeah. So you're all good there. TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 2300 UTC at twit.tv/live. Be part of the show, as always, by emailing us, tnt@twit.tv. Leave us a short voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW, and find us on Twitter. We're at Tech News Today TV.
You can share your thoughts on the stories we discuss in the TNT subreddit at technewstoday.reddit.com. You can find all the ways to subscribe to our show at twit.tv/TNT. And if you want to tweet at me, I'm at NateOG.
And I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. Thanks to our technical director, Brian Burnett. Thank you, sir, as always. Thank you to Burke for helping out here and writing Padre's name on a sheet when none of us wanted to say the name out loud. You went there. And for that, we salute you. Thanks to Kevin for editing the show, and thanks to you for talking tech with us today. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye, everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.